بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. So we're resuming the classes after a long break. It was Ramadan, and then then weekend next Ramadan we felt that most of the people would not be back, and then the weekend after that I was out of town, and then we're back, alhamdulillah. So inshallah we will, you remember in the fiqh classes we finished the book of Tahara, alhamdulillah, which is an accomplishment because usually people, it's an accomplishment that we're actually starting the book of Salah, because usually people just finish the book of Tahara or just go through part of the book of Tahara and then they start to look for a different book or a different sheikh or a different something. And then they start all over again from the beginning of the book of Tahara. So usually people go over the book of Tahara several times in their lives and they never proceed beyond the book of Tahara. So alhamdulillah, we're getting to the book of Salah, and we hope inshallah that one day we will finish the entire book of Al-Umda by Imam ibn Qudama rahimahullah ta'ala, which, like we said before, is a manual of Hanbali fiqh. We provide some comparative commentary on this manual. We present the positions of the three other mazahib and sometimes positions from outside of the four mazahib as well. In this series of tazkiyah, we're going over Imam al-Harawi's book Manazil As-Saa'ireen, or the stations of the wayfarers. Imam al-Harawi, as you may have heard me say, was also another Hanbali scholar, but not necessarily known for his contribution to the discipline of fiqh, but he is known for his contribution to the discipline of suluk, tazkiyah, tasawwuf, whatever you call that discipline, or the purification of the heart. He was from Herat, which is in contemporary Afghanistan, and he was a very Hanbali scholar, that's to a great extent. But Imam al-Harawi left behind a great legacy. The book has been basically elaborated on by many scholars. I choose for you the commentary of Imam al-Qayyim because when it comes to weeding out certain concepts in the discipline of suluk or the discipline of tasawwuf, Imam al-Qayyim has a very verifying approach to the discipline. He is a scholar of fiqh and a scholar of hadith. Therefore, when he discusses matters that pertain to tasawwuf, he comes in with this lens of a hadith and a fiqh scholar, which is important basically to protect us from deviation, particularly in addressing issues that pertain to the heart. Generally speaking, the discipline of tasawwuf has been less regulated than the discipline of fiqh, for instance. And you do want to be careful when you study it, and you do want the help of some verifying scholars to filter some of the concepts that may not be in complete conformity with the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or the way of the righteous predecessors, or the great Imams, including the four and their counterparts. So we finished 11 of 100 stations. The stations, Imam al-Harawi basically divided the stations into 10 categories. Each category has 10 stations, so it is 10 times 10, 100 stations. We finished 11 of the stations, of the 100 stations that Imam al-Harawi addressed in his book. Remember in the beginning, in the introduction, we said Imam al-Harawi reported from al-Kittani rahimahullah that the stations are 1,000 stations, but he, for the sake of brevity, only addressed 100 of those stations. And you will find a lot of overlap, so the 100 will cover all of the necessary stations to learn about in your way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in your travel, in your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the station number 12 here, which is Babul Khawf, the chapter on fear. And before I begin, Imam Harawi usually starts all of the stations with, he usually starts them with an ayah from the Quran. And he started this particular station by the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. It's in Surah Al-Nahl. By the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they fear their Lord above them and they do what they are commanded. They fear, in the Arabic one, there's just they fear their Lord above them. But the ayah also has, and they do what they are commanded. Now, when it comes to al-khawf, certainly when it comes to al-khawf and al-khawf from the punishment of Allah and khawf from the hellfire, it is not a secret that many people who grow up in a society like the society that you're growing up in would have aversion to discussions about an-nar or the hellfire or punishment or things of that nature, because you are trained to believe that, that there should be no punishment. Your mind is basically trained to believe that there should be no punishment. Particularly if you're a freshman in college or you're in your second year, you would want everybody to sort of, the idea of punishment itself causes you a little bit of discomfort, even punishment of criminals, or at least some of you. By the time you finish college, you would have become a little bit more moderate about it. You would have figured out that punishment is warranted for criminals, and you can't give like every criminal a voucher to attend classes, for instance, because if you have been a serial murderer, probably a voucher to attend classes about the evil of murder would not be sufficient, and there should be some other form of deterrence. But that's natural, and people do have this aversion, and people do think in this way. You just want to remind yourself that people are people, and people, and this is important all around. This is important in your approach to the religion all around. Your thoughts are a product of your upbringing. Your thoughts are a product of your society. Your thoughts out here in the Northeast are different from the thoughts of your counterparts in the Midwest, not outside of America, not in Canada. You here have, you basically go to you grow up in a different environment, you go to different colleges, whatever you are, your mind is trained to believe is different from the training that they receive somewhere in the Midwest or basically Southwest or South, or maybe it's comparable in the West, Northeast and West, it's just like comparable to a great extent. But can you imagine this? Just within the same country, within the same time, people are trained to believe in different things, and people have different understandings of the same concept. Therefore, it can't be up to us to determine. It can't be up to us to judge the wisdom of the divine. We will have at the end of the day to say, yes, I'm having some discomfort with this concept, but this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told me, therefore I will need to conform to this, I will need to accept this, I will need to take my time understanding it, and understanding the wisdom behind it. But initially what I will do is I will just surrender to it. I will just submit to it until I find comfort in my heart about it. And then when I find this comfort, I'll be able to understand it very well. So just in case, you know, and if you don't have this discomfort to begin with, then that is fine. That's great. That's good for you. That your hawa, your desires, your thoughts, your inclinations are conforming to Allah's or to the divine will or to Allah's wisdom. So that would be great for you. But if you do have this discomfort, know that you are a product of your upbringing, and know that it may take you time to find comfort in your heart about certain concepts that you may learn in the religion. The concept of the hellfire in particular causes people more discomfort. The concept of the eternity of the hellfire in particular causes people even more discomfort. What you need to know, what you need to know is that there is certainty in our religion. There is yaqeen in our religion about the presence and the existence of reward and punishment. There is yaqeen in our religion about the existence of the Jannah and the Nar, the paradise and the hellfire. Yaqeen, certainty, consensus, equaling yaqeen, certainty about the presence, the existence of al-Jannah and the Nar. There is yaqeen in our religion that some people will be distant to al-Jannah and some people will be distant in Nar. Certainty in our religion. There is certainty in our religion, yaqeen in our religion about the eternity of the Jannah. Certainty, consensus about the eternity of the Jannah. The orthodox majority position in our religion is that the Nar is eternal as well. The orthodox majority position in our religion within Ahl Sunnah is that the Nar is eternal as well. The position that the Nar is not eternal has been attributed to some great scholars within Ahl Sunnah, but that is a minority position. Those who cannot come to terms with the majority position, if they find comfort in the minority position, don't take that comfort away from them, you know, until they find comfort in the orthodox majority position. But if they cannot come to terms with the majority position, cannot, you know, their hearts are so distraught by the majority position and can only find comfort, particularly if they're new to Islam, particularly if you're inviting non-Muslims to Islam and they just cannot come to terms with the majority position, which is the eternity of the hellfire, and they find comfort in the minority position, which is not the orthodox Sunni position. I have to reiterate and emphasize, let them feel and find comfort wherever they can find it, until they can find comfort in the majority position and come to terms with it. Having said that, let's move on to discussing what Imam al-Harawi said here about the Bab al-Khawf, the chapter on fear. He said, rahimahullah, al-Khawf huwa al-inkhila'u min tuma'ninat al-amn بمطالعة الخبر وهو على 3 درجات. Fear is being removed from the assurance of security upon beholding the news. مطالعة الخبر, beholding the news, which is the news of Allah's warnings, and it is 3 levels. الخوف هو الانخلاع من طمأنينة الأمن. الخوف is basically having no assurance of security, is to lose that assurance of security. That assurance of security that people have when people say, you know, back in our countries, whenever people talk, whenever you remind people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they tell you what? رَبِّنَا غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. You know, just leave me alone. It's none of your business. رَبِّنَا غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah is forgiving and merciful. These people have the assurance of security. They have طُمَأْنِينَةَ الْأَمْن. They feel secure from the punishment of Allah. That security from the punishment of Allah is the predecessor, is the grandfather of heedlessness, callousness, indifference, lack of religious commitment. Why did Allah create the hellfire? Why did Allah warn you of His punishment? Why does Allah tell you in the Quran, فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ فَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. It's an obligation to fear from Him. Allah said, إنما ذلكم الشيطان يخوف أولياءه in Surah Ali Imran, فلا تخافوهم وخافوني إن كنتم مؤمنين. It is the shaitan threatening his awliya, threatening his followers. فلا تخافوهم, then don't fear from them. وخافوني, and fear from me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Bani Israel, يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأوفوا بعهدي أوفي بعهدكم من سورة البقرة وإياي فارهبون. O Bani Israel, remember my favors upon you and fulfill my covenant. وإياي فارهبون, and only me. Fear from me alone. Fear from me alone. وإياي فارهبون. And rahba is like khawf, but rahba is a little bit different from khawf. It's the beginning stages of khawf. Rahba, in Arabic, you look for the three-lettered origin of the word, and it gives you a lot of meanings. And rahba is very close in meaning to haraba. Rahiba, haraba. Rahiba means feared. Haraba means ran away. So rahba and harab, they are close in their origin, because they are somewhat close in their meaning. Because rahab, which is fear, it is fear that is associated with running away, to run away from the maharim of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is the beginning phases of fear, and we will talk about how fear is divided into different phases. And not all of it involves running away. Some of it involves stillness, composure, and sakina. So he says here, fear is being removed from the assurance of security. Basically, you remember that Allah is Ghafur Rahim only when you're about to have qunut, when you're about to have excessive fear. You remind yourself that Allah, you always remember that Allah is Ghafur Rahim. I'm not saying that you don't remember it all the time, but you remind yourself, this is basically the prevalent feeling. You want to bring this into your heart as the prevalent feeling when you start to fear excessive fear from the punishment of Allah that brings you down, that causes you too much distress and distraughtness. Then you remind yourself, Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, and wasi'at rahmatuhu kulla shay. His mercy encompasses all things, and His mercy precedes His anger. You want to remind yourself of all of this when the fear becomes excessive, when you become so distressed and distraught, and then you remind yourself of this. But if you are so callous, and if you are so indifferent, and why should you want to be reminded of this and not reminded of the punishment of Allah? This is the time when you should be reminded of the punishment of Allah. And remember that hope and fear, raja and khawf, are the two wings of the bird, the three emotions that direct your approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The three emotions that basically direct you in your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are love, hubban, khawfan, raja. Love, fear, and hope. And they're like a bird. The head of the bird, or the body of the bird, you could say, is hub. It is the body of the bird, or the head of the bird. And then khawf and raja are the two wings of the bird, which is fear and hope. And if you feel that one of the wings is more active than the other one, it's taking you away, it is deviating your direction because it's more active, whether it is khawf or raja. Like khawf, if it is more active, the wing of khawf, it will basically cause you qunut, take you away from the straight direction to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is dictated predominantly by hub. It's the body of the bird. The love is the body of the bird, is the head of the bird. But then when khawf is overactive, that wing of khawf is overactive, and it sways you or deviates you, takes you away from the proper direction of your journey, then you make sure that you activate the wing of raja, which is the wing of hope, and you remind yourself of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and vice versa. At all times, it is hubb that is the predominant feeling. Hubb should always be the predominant feeling. The competition is not between hubb and khawf. Keep in mind, the competition is between raja and khawf. But hubb is the predominant feeling at all times. It is the predominant emotion that governs your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times, hubb. And then khawf and raja are competing with each other. And you basically add a measure of khawf when it is necessary, add a measure of raja when it is necessary. You control the two wings, but make sure that hubb is the predominant feeling in this journey. Okay, so he says that khawf is basically being removed from the assurance of security. You do not have this assurance of security until you make it to paradise. Then when your 2 feet are inside al-Jannah, then you will have this assurance of security. After you have gone through your hisab, you've gone through your interview, you've gone through your meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you were given your book with the right hand, and you were invited into the Jannah, and your 2 feet are inside, then you could then take a deep sigh and say, Alhamdulillah, alladhi sadaqana wa'ada. All praise be to Allah who fulfilled His promise. Yeah.
Do you have any advice as to how can we balance the hope and fear? Because we do sin a lot every single day, and then we say, okay, Allah, we are having hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will forgive us, and that actually most of the time makes us sin even more. So how do we balance this two?
No, when you're sinning all the time, you do not, and we are all sinning all the time, but what I'm trying to say, if you feel that you have too much hope, then that is, you should add a measure of khawf in this case. You should remind yourself, and we will say, the precursors of khawf, we will talk about them in the next paragraph, how to add a measure of khawf, because that should not be your predominant feeling in this case. Your raja should not outweigh your khawf if you're sinning all the time. And we are all sinning all the time. It's just that it depends on the type of sins, and it depends on the frequency of sins, and it depends also on the state of your heart. Are you frightened by your sins or not? Do you feel anxious or not? And we will come to this inshallah now. Then he talked about the khawf coming in 3 degrees, and he said الدرجة الأولى الخوف من العقوبة وهو الخوف الذي يصح به الإيمان. The first level is the fear from the punishment, and that is the fear through which faith is validated. الخوف الذي يصح به الإيمان. To fear from the punishment of Allah, to fear from the hellfire, and that is the fear through which faith is validated. Why does he say this? He is saying that people who say that we have no fear from Allah, they have no faith, they have no iman. They're mutually exclusive. To have no fear from Allah is mutually exclusive with iman. So there has to be the fear of Allah in one's heart. It is an obligation. Allah told you, فَخَافُونِي, fear me, فَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ, fear me alone. Then people who say that we have no fear and it is all about love. Yes, it is predominantly about love, but can you imagine saying to your father, I don't fear from you? That is disrespectful. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. But you can't say to your father, I don't fear from you. Because that shows disrespect. Yes, at the end of the day, love is the predominant feeling in your heart. But you also should fear from your father. You should fear from your father's punishment. Or you cannot say to your father, your father buys you a gift, and then you say to him, you know what, I love you, Dad, but this is, I don't really care about this gift, or I have no interest in this gift. So Allah tells you, I prepared the Jannah for you. And then you say to Allah, I don't really care about the Jannah. I have no interest in the Jannah. He says that He made it for you Himself, and He prepared it, and He, added all of those pleasures and enjoyments. So Allah is telling you, celebrate my gift, and you're telling Him, I don't care about your gift. I have no interest in your Jannah. That is disrespectful. So hubb, yes, is the predominant feeling, but khawf and raja are necessary for one to have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's saying here, الدرجة الأولى الخوف من العقوبة وهو الخوف الذي يصح به الإيمان. First, the first level is the fear from punishment, and that is the fear through which faith is validated. There has to be a level of fear for faith to be valid. وهو خوف العامة, and it's the fear of the masses. It does not mean that the khassa or the elites or the special ones will not have this fear, that they'll have more of it. But al-khawf al-amma, the masses, that is the type of fear they have. The elites will have more fear, but their fear will be of a different kind. And then he said, وهو يتولد من تصديق الوعيد وذكر الجناية ومراقبة العاقبة. These are the three basically precursors, or the three ingredients of fear. تصديق الوعيد, believing the warnings. ذكر الجناية, being mindful of the offenses. ومراقبة العاقبة, and being watchful of the endings. تصديق الجناية is to believe, تصديق الوعيد is to believe in the warnings of Allah, to believe in all of these ayat in the Quran that talk about the hellfire, that talk about the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And people who who do not believe in those ayat, they will certainly be indifferent. Dhikr al-jinaya is being mindful of the offenses. As Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, that the believer feels that his dhunub كأنه قاعد تحت جبل يوشك أن يقع عليه. He feels that he's sitting underneath a mountain that's on top of him that's about to fall on his head. And the fajr, the wicked one, feels that his dhunub are like flies, that he will do like this and they will fly away. So they're just so light, so insignificant, like flies sitting on his face or his head, that will simply go away by doing like this, waving with his hand. But the believer feels that there is a mountain on top of him, feels that his dhunub, his sins, are like a mountain on top of his head that is about to fall on him. And then muraqabatul aqiba. Muraqabatul aqiba, it is to be watchful of the hereafter. It is to be of abna al-akhirah. It's to feel like Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu said, إن الدنيا قد ارتحلت مدبرة وإن الآخرة قد ارتحلت مقبلة فكونوا من أبناء الآخرة ولا تكونوا من أبناء الدنيا. That the dunya had already departed, going away, and the akhirah departed, coming on. So be of the children of the akhirah. Be watchful of this. The akhirah is moving closer to you, closer and closer and closer. So be of the, watch al-akhirah. Don't watch your dunya. The dunya is leaving you. The akhirah is approaching. So be of the children of the akhirah. Be of the children that are mindful. Be of those who are mindful of al-akhirah. And mindful of, like we said before, Uthman ibn Affan used to be even more anxious when he hears about al-qabr than the hereafter, because it's the first manazil, it is the first station of the stations of the hereafter, and they used to do this to themselves all the time. Harun al-Rashid commanded that they will dig a grave for him. Then he said, "Ma aghna anni maliya." He used to look at the grave and say, "Ma aghna anni maliya, halaka anni sultaniya." That my wealth does not avail me or will not avail me. Halaka anni sultaniya, my sultan, my power is all gone, all destroyed. And al-Ma'mun, when al-Ma'mun died, and I know that al-Ma'mun strikes some negative feelings in your hearts, but he was a righteous man. He's a righteous, wise man. He deviated in certain regards, but he was a righteous and a wise man. And so when al-Ma'mun died, when al-Ma'mun was about to die, he put his head on the floor and he said, "Ya man la yazulu mulku, irham man qad zala mulku." Oh, one whose dominion never vanishes, or his mulk, his kingdom, never vanishes, show mercy on the one whose kingdom or whose power vanished. So being watchful of al-akhirah, being watchful of the hereafter is essential, and that's why one of the things that we should train our children to be, from, the very early phases of their life, al-iman billah wal yawm al-akhir, belief in Allah and belief in the hereafter. If you inculcate the belief in Allah and the hereafter in your children, that will protect them in their future, and that will protect them from being indifferent towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was this young woman, there is a report that there was this young woman in Basra, a young girl in Basra, who used to be very righteous. And at the time of her death, Al-Hasan al-Basri went to visit her. He was told that she's dying. So he went to visit her because he had known of her righteousness. And then he found her very anxious. And he tried to calm her down and remind her of all of her righteousness and so on. And she said to him, "Ya Aba Sa'id, I heard my mother say to my father, Jahiz laha kafana." I heard my mother say to my father, "Go get her shrouds, or get her shrouds ready, or prepare her shrouds, her kafan." "Wallahi ya Aba Sa'id, law qila li anni musafiratun ila Makkah aw al-Madinah wahdi lastawhasht." "Oh Abu Sa'id, by Allah, if they tell me that I will travel alone to Mecca or Medina, I would be anxious. I would be anxious about traveling alone to Mecca or Medina. فكيف وأنا مسافرة اليوم فكيف وأنا أسافر إلى يوم القيامة." So how about when the reality is that I'm traveling alone to Yawm al-Qiyamah, or the day of resurrection? So people who are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who believe in the wordings of Allah, who are aware of their sins and the gravity and the magnitude of their sins, and they're also watchful of the hereafter or al-akhirah, are people who will always have this fear from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is basically the first level of fear. That's the first level of fear. Then he said, والدرجة الثانية خوف المكر في جريان الأنفاس المستغرقة في اليقظة المشوبة بالحلاوة. والدرجة الثانية خوف المكر في جريان الأنفاس المستغرقة في اليقظة المشوبة بالحلاوة. The second level is fear from the plotting, that is al-makr, the plotting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while one rejoices in the times of wakefulness that are mixed with the sweetness of faith. So people who are pious, people who are engaged in obedience, people who are doing ta'at, people who spend their days in fasting, and and they're doing ta'at, they stay away from the maharam of Allah, they stay away, they never violate the rights of others, they never hurt other people, they never, their tongue never utters a word of obscenity or a hurtful word against anyone. Who they always speak good to people and so on. People who are living a life of righteousness. This life of righteousness is the life of wakefulness. الأنفاس المستغرقة في اليقظة. Every breath comes out in a state of wakefulness. Every breath that comes out of their chest, it is a state of wakefulness. They are awake all the time. They're watchful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. They have no heedlessness or ghafla whatsoever. And that state of wakefulness is mixed with mashuba bil halawa, halawat al-iman. It's mixed with the sweetness of faith. Because when you are in this state of wakefulness, you find the sweetness of faith. Yet, la yaghtarrun. They never get deluded with this sweetness, with this state. They know that this is all but a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have no power to stay where they are. So they never feel secure from the plotting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They could be removed from the station at any time. Any ujb, any, self-conceit, any pride in their deeds, any thinking that they own it, they own the station, I got there by my work, I own it, can get you removed from the station immediately, spontaneously. And Allah would not care where you end up being and in which station you end up being. Allah could remove you from the station. You can imagine after, ascending and climbing the mountain, the steep hill, and then you get removed from it, you fall. And it could be a free fall, and you could end up, in the worst of stations. Iblis, you see how he was removed from his station when he had this ujb inside him, and where he ended up being. So this is the khawf, this is the second layer, or the second level of khawf. It's the khawf of the people who are obedient. The khawf of the people who are obedient. But this khawf is a little different from the first level of khawf. This is the khawf of people who have knowledge of Allah, who have awareness and recognition. This is called, the scholars use the word khashya for this. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Fatir, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Only those who have khashya of Allah out of His servants are the ulama, the scholars, those endowed with knowledge. Not the scholars in the sense of those who have information, those who possess information, those who are endowed with true knowledge. That's the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is beneficial information, beneficial knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that moves them, that basically governs their actions, their conduct. It is not any ulama. We were just talking about this hadith, which has been authenticated by several scholars of hadith, which is أكثر منافقي أمتي قراءها, which means that the hypocrisy in my ummah is most prevalent among the qurra, which is a word that used to mean in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, not just reciters, but scholars. So the hypocrisy in my ummah is most prevalent among the scholars. And for many reasons, this hadith has to be balanced out with all of the hadith that talk about the virtue of knowledge and the virtue of the scholars and the status of the scholars in Islam. It has to be balanced out. but it is a reminder for the people of knowledge, the people who possess knowledge, that hypocrisy is closer to them than it is closer to anyone of the public, because they have something to show off. And because the shaitan will not allow them basically to enjoy that sincerity, because they had corrected their actions already through knowledge. Nothing is left between them and paradise is to correct their intentions. And the shaitan will not leave them alone, except if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saves them from the shaitan. But it is important to know that it is not just about information, it's about beneficial knowledge. Now this khashya is different from al-khawf. It's different from the first level of al-khawf, because al-khawf, involves an anxiety. Al-khashya involves composure and stillness. Because the people who have khashya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have made their provisions already. They have taken their precautions already. They started the journey in an armored vehicle. They started their journey in an armored vehicle. They know how to protect themselves. So if people who have this anxiety, the fear of the first level of khawfa, if they are attacked by a lion, for instance, they run in different directions. They don't know where to go because they have no knowledge. The people who have the knowledge, the ulama, or the people who have true awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognition of Allah and what is pleasing to Him and what is displeasing to Him, they find protection nearby, because they started the journey in an armored vehicle and they don't go away from it. So if a lion is approaching, or like an attacker or a predator is approaching, what they do is they get inside their vehicle. They get protection in the ta'at of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, away from the ma'asi of Allah. Now if they are inside this armored vehicle, are they less afraid of the lion? No, they're not less afraid of the lion. It's just that they know how to protect themselves. It's like a doctor, for instance, and a lay person. The doctor may have more fear than the lay person from diseases because he knows all the diseases. And he may have more fear, what he reads the ingredients and he watches, without being obsessive for sure, but he reads the ingredients and he watches what he eats, and he knows that, this surface may have all of those germs, so he washes his hands after he touches the unclean surfaces and so on, because he has more awareness than the lay person. But the doctor, when he's told that of a disease or something, he knows the medicine. He goes and grabs the medicine and takes the medicine. The lay person feels an anxiety because of this lack of awareness. May have less fear, but more anxiety. The knowledgeable person will have more fear because of his greater awareness, but less anxiety. It is fear with composure, fear with sakina, that is the khashya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does not run in all directions. He does not run, without direction. He knows. He gets into his armored vehicle. He seeks protection in the ta'ah of Allah, away from the ma'siyah of Allah. And the ta'ah of Allah is not limited to actions of the body. It is about the heart. He knows, that humility and humbleness is his protection from the shaitan, and that arrogance and pride would befall him into the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is why it is important to distinguish between al-khawf and al-khashya in this regard. Khawf, it may be less than khashya, less in amount, but khashya has this sakina and composure, because it is the khawf of the people of knowledge, people of true knowledge. Then he moves on to the third phase, and then he says, وَلَيْسَ فِي مَقَامِ أَهْلِ الْخُصُوصِ وَحْشَةُ الْخَوْفِ إِلَّا هَيْبَةُ الْإِجْلَالِ وهي أقصى درجة يشار إليها في غاية الخوف. وليس في مقام أهل الخصوص. For the elitist among the believers, ليس في مقام وحشة الخوف إلا هيبة الإجلال. There is not that desolation of fear. وحشة الخوف. Desolation of fear, it is the desolation of one who is distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the bleakness, it is the, of being distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the loneliness, the fear that is mixed with an anxiety, because you're muqarrab now. Muqarrab comes in the passive voice, right? Because to be a muqarrab means that you were chosen to come close. You can't do this on your own. You can do this on your own until you are tuqarrab, which means to be brought close to Allah. Someone will bring you close. It is Allah who will bring you close. It's Allah who will invite you to be close. So the muqarrabun, the people who are already close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a different type of khawf. They have khawf, but it's the different type of khawf. It's haybatul ijlal, which is basically the awe of divine reverence. The awe of divine reverence. Can you imagine being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It is the shock, the awe of divine reverence that will control your feelings. It is not the khawf of the beginners who running away in different directions, afraid of the punishment of Allah. It's not even the khashya of the scholars, but for the muqarrabun, it is the awe of divine reverence. That does not mean that they don't have the first and the second level. It means that they have reached the third level of khawf or fear. Some of the scholars, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, for instance, he divides the hayba and al-ijlal into two different types with two different categories. But you could put haybat and ijlal together, to not complicate things. So al-hayba is the awe, ijlal is the divine reverence. It is the awe of divine reverence. It is your feeling of the divine reverence that will cause this awe in your heart when you are invited to closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وهي أقصى درجة يشار إليها في غاية الخوف. It is the highest ranking to be pointed out at the peak of the station of fear, at the peak of the station of fear. So, and this is basically where like Fudayl ibn Iyad, for instance, during Hajj, during his time in Arafah, he kept on crying for his entire wuquf to Arafah. He had his head on the ground, and then when he lifted his head up, he said, he was praying for forgiveness. And then he said, وَسَوْأَتَاهُ مِنْكَ وَإِنْ غَفَرْتَ. وَسَوْأَتَاهُ مِنْكَ وَإِنْ غَفَرْتَ. What a disgrace, what a disgrace, even if you forgive. Even if you forgive, the disgrace is to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be shown all of your evil and wicked deeds. Even if He forgave you, it is so disgraceful to come back to Him, to return to Him with all of those evil deeds, even if they were forgiven. And that is the level of al-muqarrabun. It becomes, like a feeling of shyness. You're too shy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to go back to Him with all of those evil deeds, even if they were forgiven. He says it is the وهي هيبة تعارض المكاشف أوقات المناجاة وتصون المشاهد أحيان المسامرة وتقسم المعاين بصدمة العزة. وهي هيبة, it's awe that is encountered, the تعارض المكاشف أوقات المناجاة, that is encountered by the one in a state of disclosure during the times of soft conversation. These are people who are close to Allah. They have munajah with Allah. They have soft conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But never remove the barrier of respect. of reverence. You should not, the word in Arabic is rafa taklif, but I like, it would be just don't remove that veil of respect when you are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if He invited you closer, even if you're enjoying a soft conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, still maintain the respect and the reverence. And that is the haiba, the awe that will keep you in check, that will keep you respectful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even after being invited to closeness and proximity, to qurb. It protects the witness, المشاهد, وتصون المشاهد أحيانا المسامرة. It protects the witness or the witness. المشاهد is from مشاهدة. The difference between al-mushahid and mu'ayyin that he will talk about is that al-mu'ayyin is an eyewitness. Al-mushahid could be an eyewitness, but not necessarily an eyewitness. But al-mu'ayyin is an eyewitness. So he says it protects the witness or the observer during the time of friendly musamara, friendly nightly dialogues. Friendly dialogues at night. That's al-musamara. When you have a friendly dialogue with your friends at night, it's called musamara. Sit down after Aisha or before Aisha, hopefully, and have some musamara, that is friendly dialogue with your friends. Their musamara is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have this friendly dialogue with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's saying here, it protects the witness or the observer during the time of friendly dialogues of the night. And it strikes the mu'ayyin. That's the highest level of qurb now. It is al-mu'ayyin, it is the eyewitness, it is the one who truly worships Allah as if he sees him with his eyes. These eyes, the eyes of his head, not just the eyes of his heart, as if he truly sees him with the eyes of his head, and it strikes the eyewitness or beholder with the shock of divine might. بصدمة العزة وتقسم المعاين بصدمة العزة. And that is the highest level of khawf. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who have taqwa. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who fear Him and fear His punishment and hope in His reward, and to be of His beloved ones, and those who love no one more than they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hold no one dearer than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their hearts. قل قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.